The deed slapped onto the worn table of the Silver Dollar Saloon with such force that whiskey sloshed from Quinn Nolan's glass, and the sound of mocking laughter that followed would haunt him for months to come. It was March of 1883, and Wasco, California, had seen better days. The small town sat in the San Joaquin Valley, a dusty collection of wooden buildings that served the ranchers and farmers trying to scratch out a living from the unforgiving land. Quinn had been working cattle drives for the past 8 years, ever since he turned 18 and left his family's failing homestead in Kansas. He had saved nearly every cent, dreaming of the day he could buy his own piece of land and build something real, something lasting. That dream had brought him to the attention of Cornelius Whitmore, the wealthiest man in 3 counties. Whitmore owned half the valley, controlled the water rights, and had his fingers in every profitable venture from here to Sacramento. Quinn had made the mistake of mentioning his ambitions in the wrong saloon, and word had traveled fast. When Whitmore's man had approached him with an offer to discuss a land purchase, Quinn's heart had soared with hope. Now, standing in front of 24 witnesses, Quinn stared at the deed Whitmore had just presented with theatrical flourish. The wealthy man's jowls shook with laughter, his expensive suit straining across his considerable belly as he slapped the bar. 500 acres, boy, just like you wanted, Whitmore announced, his voice booming through the suddenly quiet saloon. Paid for in full with that pathetic little sack of coins you brought me. It is all legal and proper. Quinn's hands trembled as he picked up the document. His eyes scanned the words, trying to make sense of what he was reading. This says the land is in Alaska territory. That it does. Whitmore's grin was vicious. 500 acres of the finest frozen wasteland you ever did see, up near some god-forsaken place called Juneau. They tell me it snows there 10 months out of the year, and the other 2 months it just rains ice. The saloon erupted in laughter. Men Quinn had worked beside, had shared meals with, were nearly falling off their chairs. One of Whitmore's ranch hands was pounding the table so hard the cards jumped. "You cannot be serious," Quinn said, his voice low and dangerous. "I gave you 8 years of savings, every dollar I earned. And I gave you exactly what you asked for, land, 500 acres of it." Whitmore leaned back, hooking his thumbs in his vest pockets. "Not my fault you did not specify where. The deed is legal. I had my lawyer draw it up proper. You wanted to be a landowner so bad, and now you are one. Congratulations, boy." Quinn felt the world tilting beneath his feet. $3,000. 8 years of backbreaking work, sleeping under stars, eating trail dust, dodging stampedes and rattlesnakes and rustlers. All of it poured into a piece of frozen hell he would never even see, let alone work. "Why?" The word came out barely above a whisper. Whitmore's expression hardened, all pretense of humor vanishing. "Because men like you need to learn their place. You come into my town, working my cattle, using my resources, and then you start getting ideas above your station, thinking you can be like me, own land like me. I built my empire from nothing, and I will be damned if I let some drifter cowboy think he can waltz in and claim a piece of my valley." The wealthy man stood, adjusting his hat. "Consider it a lesson. Now you can spend the rest of your life knowing you own 500 acres you will never use, never see, never profit from. And every time you throw a bedroll down on someone else's land, you can think about how close you came." Quinn's hands clenched into fists, the deed crumpling slightly in his grip. He wanted to lunge across the table, to wipe that satisfied smirk off Whitmore's face. But he had seen what happened to men who crossed Cornelius Whitmore. They ended up run out of town if they were lucky, face down in a ditch if they were not. Nothing to say. Whitmore adjusted his cufflinks. Well then, gentlemen, drinks are on me tonight. Let us celebrate our new landowner and his Arctic paradise." Fresh laughter followed Quinn as he stumbled out of the saloon into the cool evening air. March in the valley meant the worst of winter was past, but the nights still carried a chill. He walked without direction, his boots carrying him away from the noise and mockery, away from the shattered remains of his dreams. He found himself at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrubland and the first hints of the surrounding farmland. In the distance, he could see the Sierra Nevada mountains still capped with snow. Beautiful land, rich land, land he would never own. Quinn sank down onto a large rock, the deed still clutched in his hand. He smoothed it out, reading it again by the light of the rising moon. It was all there, legal and proper as Whitmore had said. 500 acres along the Gastineau Channel near Juneau, Alaska Territory. Purchased from the Federal Land Office, registered in his name. Quinn Nolan, landowner. The bitter laugh that escaped him startled a nearby rabbit into the brush. What was he supposed to do now? He had no money left, no prospects, no plan. He could work cattle again, start saving from scratch, but it would take another 8 years at least, and by then he would be 34 years old. The dream of building his own ranch, his own legacy, seemed to recede further with every passing moment. A sound behind him made Quinn turn. A woman stood in the moonlight, and for a moment he thought his grief-addled mind was playing tricks on him. She was perhaps the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, with long, dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes that caught the moonlight like stars. She wore a simple dress that marked her as working class, but she carried herself with a dignity that seemed at odds with her surroundings. "I am sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I did not mean to intrude. I heard what happened at the saloon. The whole town has heard by now." Quinn stood quickly, brushing dust from his pants. "Then you know I am the biggest fool in California. I know you are a man who got cheated by someone with more money and less conscience." She took a few steps closer. "My name is Beatrice Bridges. I work at the general store, Quinn Nolan." He gestured vaguely with the deed. "Proud owner of 500 acres of frozen nothing. May I see it?" He handed her the document, watching as her eyes scanned the words. She was younger than he had first thought, probably close to his own age. There was something careful in the way she held herself, as if she was used to being watchful. "Juneau," she read aloud. "I have heard of it. There was an article in the newspaper last year. They found gold there. Lot of good it does me. I have no money to get there, and even if I did, what would I do? Freeze to death on my own land instead of someone else's." Beatrice looked up from the deed, and there was an intensity in her gaze that caught him off guard. "You could go." "What? You could actually go there, use the land." She handed the document back to him. "I know it seems impossible, but you have something most people never get. A chance to start completely over, somewhere new." Quinn shook his head. "You do not understand. I have nothing. No money, no supplies, no way to get to Alaska Territory even if I wanted to. You have 500 acres of land. That is not nothing." Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. "Mr. Whitmore thought he was destroying you tonight. What if you proved him wrong?" "How? I cannot eat dirt, and I cannot sell frozen tundra. There are ships that leave from San Francisco for Alaska. They carry miners and supplies north. Some of them take workers in exchange for passage." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I know because I have been researching it. I have been trying to find a way north for months now." Quinn studied her more closely. "Why would you want to go to Alaska?" Something shifted in her expression, a shadow of old pain. "Because I need to disappear. Mr. Whitmore has decided that I should be his mistress. He has made it clear that if I refuse, I will lose my job, and he will make sure I cannot find work anywhere in the valley. My family depends on my income. My father is sick, and I have 2 younger sisters. The fury that had been simmering in Quinn's chest since the saloon flared hotter. That bastard. He is a powerful man who is used to getting what he wants. Beatrice's voice was steady, but he could hear the fear beneath it. I have been trying to save enough to run, but he is getting impatient. Tonight, watching what he did to you, I realized something. We both need to escape him. What if we did it together? Quinn blinked, certain he had misheard. Together, you have land in Alaska. I have been studying everything I can about the territory. I know which ships are most likely to take workers, what supplies are essential, what the conditions are like. She spoke faster now, as if afraid she would lose her nerve. We could travel as a married couple. It would be safer for both of us that way, and it would give me protection from anyone Whitmore might send after me. You want to marry me? A man you just met. I want to survive, Beatrice said simply. And I think you do too. This does not have to be a real marriage, not at first. We could be partners, helping each other get to Alaska and build something there. After that, we could go our separate ways if you wanted. Quinn turned away, his mind reeling. 2 hours ago, he had been a man with a plan and savings. Now he was broke, publicly humiliated, and being proposed to by a desperate stranger who wanted to flee to the frozen north. The sensible thing would be to say no, to wish her well, to find some other way forward. But what other way was there? Whitmore controlled the valley. Quinn would never get a fair shake here, not after tonight. And the thought of that fat, cruel man forcing himself on this brave, frightened woman made his blood boil. When does the next ship leave from San Francisco? He heard himself ask. In 2 weeks. The Pacific Star. She runs supplies and miners north every spring. And you think we could get on as workers? I think we have a better chance together than apart. Beatrice moved to stand beside him, both of them looking out at the dark valley. I will not pretend this is not desperate and possibly insane. But Mr. Whitmore thought he was throwing you away like garbage tonight. What if instead he accidentally gave you the key to a whole new life? Quinn looked down at the deed in his hands. 500 acres. It was still more land than most men would ever own, even if it was frozen. And the humiliation burning in his chest demanded some kind of response, some way to prove that he was not broken by tonight's mockery. We would be partners, he said slowly. Equal partners. Whatever we build there, we build together. Equal partners, Beatrice agreed. And the marriage is just for appearances, for safety, until we decide otherwise. Yes. Quinn took a deep breath, wondering if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Then I suppose we should start planning. We have 2 weeks to get to San Francisco and convince a ship's captain to take us north. The smile that broke across Beatrice's face was like sunrise. We should leave Wasco as soon as possible, tomorrow if we can manage it. Your family. I will leave them most of what little money I have saved. It is not much, but it will buy them time. My sisters are old enough to find work, and maybe without Whitmore threatening their employer, they will have better luck than I did. Sadness flickered in her eyes. My father will understand. He has seen the way Whitmore looks at me. They spent the next hour sitting on that rock, making plans in whispered voices. Beatrice proved to have a sharp, practical mind. She had maps she had secretly purchased from the general store, books about Alaska borrowed from the town's small library, even a list of supplies they would need. Quinn contributed his knowledge of survival, his experience with hard living and difficult conditions. By the time they parted ways to pack their few belongings, Quinn felt something he had not felt since walking into the Silver Dollar Saloon earlier that evening. Hope. The next morning, before dawn, 2 figures slipped out of Wasco heading west. Quinn carried everything he owned in a worn canvas bag, his saddle slung over one shoulder. He had sold his horse the day before for a fraction of what it was worth, but the money would help get them to San Francisco. Beatrice traveled even lighter, a single carpet bag holding her possessions, and a small purse of coins she pressed into the hands of her youngest sister before they left. They caught a freight wagon heading toward Bakersfield, trading work for the ride. Quinn helped load and unload cargo while Beatrice mended a torn canvas cover. The driver, a grizzled man who asked no questions, dropped them at a junction where they could catch a coach north. For 3 days they traveled, spending their limited resources carefully. They slept rough when they could, bought the cheapest food available, and spoke little to their fellow travelers. Quinn found himself stealing glances at his companion when he thought she was not looking. Beatrice bore the hardship without complaint, never once suggesting they turn back or give up on their admittedly wild plan. San Francisco rose before them on a foggy morning, a city of hills and noise and opportunity. The bay was crowded with ships of every size, their masts creating a forest of wood and rope and canvas. The smell of fish and salt water and coal smoke filled the air. They made their way to the docks, asking questions, getting directions, slowly narrowing down their search. The Pacific Star turned out to be a steam-powered vessel, newer than most of the ships in the harbor, with both sails and a steam engine to power her north. Her captain was a weathered man named Jensen who looked them up and down with skeptical eyes. "Alaska," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the water. "You two do not look like miners." "We are not," Quinn said. "We have land up near Juneau, 500 acres. We are going to work it." Jensen laughed, but not unkindly. "Son, do you have any idea what you are talking about? That land is probably covered in trees and rocks and permafrost. You cannot farm it, not like down here." "Then we will figure out something else," Beatrice said firmly. "We need passage north, Captain. We are willing to work for it. My husband is strong and experienced with hard labor. I can cook, clean, mend, and help with any task you need." The captain studied her with more interest. "You can cook?" "Yes, sir. My mother ran a boarding house. I have been cooking for crowds since I was 12. Our regular cook broke his arm 2 days ago," Jensen admitted. "I have been trying to find a replacement. The crew is already complaining about the slop my first mate has been serving." He looked at Quinn. "You know your way around a ship?" "No, sir, but I learned fast and I am not afraid of work." Jensen chewed his tobacco thoughtfully. "Tell you what. You cook for the crew and your husband works the deck and I will get you to Juneau. But you will earn your passage. We leave in 3 days and the voyage takes 2 weeks if the weather holds. It will not be comfortable and it will not be easy." "We will take it," Quinn said immediately. "You have not heard my conditions yet. You sleep in the cargo hold. You eat after the crew eats. If we hit storms, you work through them. And if either of you proves more trouble than you are worth, I put you off at the nearest port, married couple or not." "Agreed," Beatrice said before Quinn could respond. Jensen nodded slowly. "All right then. Be back here tomorrow morning, 6 sharp. We will be loading supplies. You can start earning your way then." They shook hands on it, and as they walked away from the Pacific Star, Quinn felt the last of his ties to California falling away. There was no going back now. They had committed themselves to this mad journey north, to frozen land and unknown futures. That night, they spent their last few coins on a cheap room in a boarding house near the docks. It had 1 bed, and Quinn immediately offered to sleep on the floor. Beatrice accepted without argument, both of them too tired and nervous about the days ahead to make an issue of the awkward intimacy of their situation. "Are you scared?" Beatrice asked from the bed, her voice soft in the darkness. Quinn shifted on the hard floor, his saddle serving as a pillow. Terrified, you? Yes, a pause, but also excited. Is that strange? No, I think I feel the same way. He stared at the ceiling, barely visible in the dim light from the street. Thank you for this. I know I have not said it properly. But if you had not found me that night, I do not know what I would have done. You would have figured something out. You seem like a survivor, maybe, but I would not have had a partner. The word felt right in his mouth. That makes all the difference. Yes, Beatrice agreed. It does. They fell silent after that, both drifting into uneasy sleep. The sound of the city and the bay a constant backdrop to their dreams. The next 3 days passed in a blur of backbreaking work. Quinn hauled crates and barrels, learned the basic vocabulary of shipboard life, and tried not to embarrass himself too badly when the experienced sailors showed him how to coil rope and secure cargo. Beatrice took over the galley and immediately impressed the crew with her first dinner. A hearty stew made from the dried beef and vegetables available, seasoned with herbs she had somehow acquired from a dockside vendor. "Madam," one grizzled sailor said, his bowl already empty, "I would sail to China and back if you kept cooking like this." She smiled, pleased despite her exhaustion. "Just doing my part." Captain Jensen seemed satisfied with both of them. And when the Pacific Star cast off on a cool April morning, Quinn and Beatrice stood on deck watching San Francisco shrink behind them. The city disappeared into fog, and then there was only ocean and sky and the sound of the engine mixing with the wind. The voyage north was everything Jensen had promised and worse. The weather turned foul 3 days out, and Quinn discovered he had a miserable tendency toward seasickness. He forced himself to work through it, hauling ropes and helping reef sails in the driving rain, his stomach heaving with every swell. Beatrice proved to have steadier sea legs, and she kept the crew fed even when the galley was pitching so badly that pots threatened to fly off their hooks. At night, they collapsed together in their small corner of the cargo hold, too exhausted for conversation. But Quinn found himself increasingly aware of Beatrice's presence, the way she never complained, the quiet strength she showed in the face of difficult conditions. This was not how he had imagined partnership or marriage, but there was something real building between them, forged in shared hardship. 10 days into the voyage, the weather finally broke. The sun emerged, and the coast of Alaska Territory appeared on the horizon. Quinn stood at the rail, staring at the distant mountains, trying to comprehend that he was looking at his future. Beatrice joined him, wiping her hands on her apron. "It is beautiful. It is big," Quinn said, "and wild, and we have no idea what we are doing. We will learn." She pointed toward the mountains. "That is our land, somewhere in those hills and valleys, our chance to build something real." "Equal partners," Quinn reminded her. "Equal partners," she confirmed, and when she smiled at him, Quinn felt something shift in his chest. This was not the fake marriage of convenience they had agreed to back in Wasco. Somewhere between California and Alaska, between the storms and the work and the shared determination, it had started becoming real. The Pacific Star sailed into the harbor at Juneau on a cool morning in late April. The town was smaller than Wasco, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to the hillsides, but it buzzed with energy. Gold fever had come to Alaska, and miners crowded the docks, eager to head into the mountains and strike it rich. Captain Jensen called Quinn and Beatrice to his cabin before they disembarked. "You two did good work, better than I expected, truth be told." He handed Quinn a small leather pouch. "This is not much, but it is a bit of pay for your efforts. You earned more than your passage." Quinn felt the weight of the coins, surprised. "Thank you, Captain. We did not expect this." "I pay fair for fair work. Now, some advice. You are going to need help establishing your claim and figuring out where your land actually is. Head to the land office first, get your boundaries confirmed. Then talk to the folks at the general store. A man named Erickson runs it. Tell him I sent you. He knows the territory and can point you toward the help you will need." They shook hands all around, and then Quinn and Beatrice were walking down the gangplank onto Alaskan soil for the first time. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and snow and possibility. The land office was housed in a small cabin near the center of town. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, examined Quinn's deed with interest. "Gastineau Channel, 500 acres. Let me check the survey maps." He disappeared into a back room, returning with several rolled documents. Spreading them on his desk, he traced lines with his finger. "Here. Your property starts about 8 miles north of town, follows the channel for almost a mile, and extends back into the hills. It is mostly forested, some good water access." He looked up. "There is an old cabin on the southern edge built by a prospector who gave up and went south 2 years ago. Might be in rough shape, but it would be a place to start." Quinn felt Beatrice's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. They had land with a cabin. It was more than they had dared hope for. "How do we get there?" Beatrice asked. "You can hire someone with a boat to take you up the channel, or you can walk it. The trail is decent, follows the water most of the way. If you are carrying supplies, I would suggest the boat." They thanked the clerk and headed to Erickson's general store. The proprietor turned out to be a massive Swede with a beard that reached his chest and a booming laugh that filled the store. "Captain Jensen sent you. That old sea dog knows I am a soft touch for newcomers." Erickson looked them over. "Let me guess. You have land, no supplies, no equipment, and no idea what you are doing." "That about sums it up," Quinn admitted. "At least you are honest." Erickson pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. "Here is what you need to survive your first months here. This is not luxury, this is staying alive. Seeds that will grow in our short season. Tools for clearing land and building. Food supplies to get you through until you can harvest or hunt. Warm clothes because you Southerners have no idea what cold really means. Do you have any money at all?" Quinn showed him the pouch from Captain Jensen plus the few coins they had left. Erickson counted it carefully, then sighed. "This is enough for maybe a third of what you truly need. But I will make you a deal. I will front you the supplies on credit. You pay me back when you can, but you will work for it. I need someone strong to help with deliveries and loading shipments. And I could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen to help my wife with the restaurant we run in the back." It was a fair offer, more than fair. Quinn and Beatrice looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that married couples develop. "Yes," Quinn said. "Thank you. We will work hard and we will pay you back every cent." "I believe you will." Erickson extended his huge hand. "Welcome to Alaska, friends. Now let us get you properly outfitted before you freeze to death." The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Quinn and Beatrice would wake before dawn in the small room Erickson provided above the store. Quinn would help load supply wagons and boats, deliver goods to mines and camps around Juneau, and do whatever other hard labor Erickson needed. Beatrice would help in the kitchen, cooking meals for the steady stream of hungry miners and workers who filled the restaurant. In the evenings, they would plan. Using the maps and advice from Erickson and others, they marked out where their cabin should be, what improvements they would need, how they could possibly make the land pay. The reality was daunting. Farming was nearly impossible in Alaska's short growing season, but there were other options. Timber was valuable. The streams and rivers teemed with salmon, and the gold strikes meant constant demand for supplies and services. We could set up a way station, Beatrice suggested one night, her finger tracing the map. Our land has water access and is between Juneau and some of the mining camps further north. We could offer meals and shelter to travelers. That would require building more structures, Quinn said, and we would need to be there, not here working for Erickson. I know. But we need to start thinking long-term. We cannot work for someone else forever, no matter how kind he is. Quinn studied her in the lamplight. Over the past weeks, he had watched Beatrice transform. The frightened woman fleeing Whitmore's advances had become someone confident, purposeful. She threw herself into every task with determination, and in the evenings she was endlessly creative in thinking about their future. "What?" she asked, noticing his stare. "I was just thinking that Whitmore did us a favor in a strange way. We would never have met otherwise." Beatrice's expression softened. "I have been thinking the same thing. This sounds foolish, but I am happy here, happier than I have been in years, despite the cold and the hard work and the uncertainty." "It does not sound foolish." Quinn reached across the small table, taking her hand. "I am happy too. And I have been thinking that maybe our arrangement, this partnership we agreed to, maybe it could be more than business." Her breath caught. "More. A real marriage, real partners in every way." He felt his face flush but pushed on. "I know we barely know each other, and I know this started out of desperation. But somewhere along the way I started caring about you, Beatrice, not just as a partner, as someone I want to build a life with." Beatrice's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I care about you too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was just clinging to safety. But it is more than that. You are kind and strong and honest. You have never made me feel less than equal, never tried to control or diminish me." "Do you know how rare that is?" Quinn stood, moving around the table. He had imagined this moment 100 times, but now that it was here, he found himself nervous as a schoolboy. "Then maybe we should make it official. Have a real ceremony, say real vows, not for appearances, but for us." "Yes," Beatrice said, rising to meet him. "Yes, I want that." Their first real kiss was soft and tentative, two people finding their way toward something genuine. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The next Sunday they were married properly in Juneau's small church. Erickson stood as Quinn's witness, his wife as Beatrice's. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when Quinn slipped a small gold band onto Beatrice's finger, made by a local craftsman with some of their carefully saved money, he meant every word of the vows he spoke. That night, in their small room above the store, their partnership became a marriage in truth. Quinn discovered that Beatrice was passionate beneath her practical exterior, and she found him to be gentle and considerate. They made love slowly, learning each other, and afterward lay tangled together in the narrow bed. "Mrs. Nolan," Quinn whispered against her hair. "Mr. Nolan," she replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Are you ready to see our land tomorrow?" Erickson had agreed to give them 3 days off to finally visit their property. He was even lending them a boat and enough supplies to camp while they assessed the situation. "I am ready," Beatrice said. "I am ready to start building our real life." The next morning, they loaded a borrowed rowboat with camping supplies and set off up the Gastineau Channel. Quinn rowed while Beatrice navigated using the map from the land office. The water was calm, reflecting the mountains and forests that surrounded them. Eagles soared overhead, and at one point, a seal surfaced near the boat, regarding them with curious eyes before diving again. 8 miles passed slowly under the rhythm of Quinn's oars. Finally, Beatrice pointed to a small creek mouth. "There, that should be the southern boundary." They beached the boat and stood on the rocky shore, looking around. The land rose gradually from the water, covered in spruce and hemlock, stretching back into rolling hills. It was beautiful and wild and utterly untouched. 500 acres of this," Quinn said, wonderment in his voice. All hours. They found the cabin after an hour of searching, following what might have been an old trail. It was small, maybe 15 feet on a side, built of rough-hewn logs. The roof had partially collapsed, and animals had clearly made themselves at home inside. But the basic structure was sound, and the location was good, situated on a small rise with a view of the channel. "We can fix this," Beatrice said, already mentally cataloging what they would need. "Make it weatherproof, add a proper stove, maybe expand it eventually." Quinn examined the logs, testing their soundness. "It will take work, but yes, this is a good foundation." He turned to survey the surrounding forest. "And there is timber here. Good, straight trees. We could harvest some, sell them in Juneau, use the money to improve the property." They spent the next 2 days exploring every corner of their land. They found 2 clear streams with good water flow, several open meadows that might support a garden or livestock, and countless trees. The potential was enormous, but so was the work ahead of them. On their last night before returning to Juneau, they sat by their campfire, watching sparks rise toward the stars. "We should name it," Beatrice said. "The property. We cannot just keep calling it the land," Quinn considered. "What about New Hope? Because that is what it is." What Whitmore thought was a cruel joke became our new hope. "New Hope," Beatrice repeated, testing the name. "I like it. New Hope in Alaska, home of Quinn and Beatrice Nolan. It has a nice ring to it." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about what you would say to Whitmore if you saw him now?" "Sometimes. But mostly I just feel grateful." Quinn kissed the top of her head. "He thought he was destroying me. Instead, he gave me everything I wanted: land, a purpose, and you, especially you." "I suppose we should send him a thank-you note," Beatrice said with dry humor. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, thank you for being a cruel, arrogant bastard. It worked out wonderfully for us." They laughed together in the firelight, and Quinn realized he could not remember the last time he had felt this content. Yes, there was hard work ahead. Yes, they would struggle and face challenges they could not yet imagine. But they would face them together, as partners and spouses, building something real on land that was truly theirs. They returned to Juneau the next day, already making plans. They would work for Erickson through the summer, saving every penny they could. They would use Quinn's days off to start repairs on the cabin. They would slowly accumulate the tools and supplies they needed. And by fall, they would move to New Hope permanently. The summer of 1883 was one of the hardest and happiest of Quinn's life. He worked brutal hours, his hands developing new calluses, his back aching from lifting crates and barrels. But every night he came home to Beatrice, and her smile made it all worthwhile. She was thriving in Alaska, her cooking becoming famous among the miners and workers of Juneau. Erickson raised her pay twice, and she saved every additional cent. On Sundays, they would take the boat to New Hope and work on the cabin. Quinn replaced the collapsed roof sections, reinforced the walls, and built a proper door. Beatrice scoured the structure clean, drove out the animal inhabitants, and slowly began making it feel like a home. They scavenged what they could from abandoned claims and bought the bare minimum from Erickson's store. By August, the cabin was weatherproof and furnished with a bed frame Quinn had built, a table and chairs Beatrice had found and repaired, and a serviceable stove they had purchased with their savings. It was not much, but it was theirs. One warm evening in late August, Beatrice made an announcement over dinner. "I told Erickson today that we will be moving to New Hope in September." Quinn looked up, surprised. "You did? What did he say?" "He said he expected it, and that he has been keeping his eye out for a replacement cook. He also said he has a business proposition for us." She paused dramatically. There is a mining camp about 15 miles north of our property. The miners there are complaining about the difficulty of getting supplies and decent food. Erickson wants to establish a supply route, and he thinks New Hope would make a perfect halfway point. He is proposing that we run a way station like we discussed. He would supply us with goods on credit, and we would sell them to travelers and miners passing through. We would also provide meals and possibly shelter. Quinn set down his fork, his mind racing through the implications. That could actually work. We have the water access for deliveries by boat, and the location is right. It would mean building additional structures. At least one more cabin for guests, probably a storage building, and we would need to clear an area for docking boats more easily. Beatrice's eyes shone with excitement. But if we could make it work, we would have steady income and a real business. What percentage is Erickson proposing? He would supply goods at cost plus 20%. We would set our own prices for resale and keep the difference. Meals and lodging would be entirely our profit. He says we could be breaking even within 6 months and profitable within a year if the mining camp stays active. Quinn reached across the table, taking her hands. You really think we can do this? I think we have already done the impossible. We made it to Alaska with nothing. We survived and saved and built a foundation. This is just the next step. She squeezed his hands. What do you say, partner? I say we do it. Quinn grinned. I say we build the best damned way station in Alaska territory. They moved to New Hope on a crisp September morning. Erickson had been generous, giving them a substantial stake of supplies to start their venture. All on credit they would repay as their business grew. Quinn made trip after trip in the boat, hauling crates and barrels and bags, while Beatrice organized everything in the cabin and the small storage lean-to Quinn had built. That first night in their own home on their own land, they made love in front of the stove and fell asleep listening to wolves howl in the distant hills. Quinn had never imagined such happiness was possible. The next months were a whirlwind of activity. Word spread quickly about the new way station at New Hope. Miners heading to and from the northern camps began stopping regularly. Quinn built a second cabin for guests, crude but functional, with bunks for 8 people. Beatrice established a reputation for hearty, delicious meals, and soon travelers were timing their trips to arrive at New Hope for lunch or dinner. Quinn also began harvesting timber, using borrowed equipment to fell trees and prepare logs. He would raft them down the channel to Juneau, sell them to the sawmill, and use the profits to buy more supplies and equipment. It was backbreaking work, but every log brought them closer to financial stability. Winter came early and hard. By November, snow blanketed New Hope, and the channel began developing ice along its edges. Travel slowed, but it did not stop entirely. Hardy miners still passed through, and Beatrice's warm cabin and hot food became even more attractive in the bitter cold. Quinn learned to snowshoe and trap, supplementing their food supplies with rabbit, grouse, and the occasional deer. Beatrice learned to make soap, tan hides, and preserve food. They taught each other, learned together, became a seamless team. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the stove in their cabin, the windows frosted over, the world outside silent with snow. Quinn handed Beatrice a small wrapped package. "You did not have to get me anything," she protested. "We need to save every penny." "Open it." Inside was a small wooden carving, a bear standing on its hind legs. Quinn had worked on it secretly for weeks, using scraps of wood and a borrowed carving knife. "Quinn, it is beautiful," Beatrice breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You made this. I wanted you to have something to remember our first year here. The year we built New Hope." She wiped at her eyes. "I have something for you too." She reached under the bed and pulled out a folded shirt, sewn from fabric she had carefully saved and purchased. "I know your other shirts are getting worn through. This one should last." Quinn unfolded it, admiring the careful stitching, the solid construction. "Beatrice, this must have taken hours." "I worked on it after you fell asleep." She smiled. "We are a pair, keeping secrets to surprise each other." He pulled her close, the shirt clutched between them. "I love you. I should say it more often. I love you, Beatrice Nolan." "I love you too," she whispered back. "More than I thought possible." They had no way of knowing it then, but Beatrice was already pregnant with their first child, conceived sometime in the flurry of their busy fall. She would realize it in January when her monthly courses stopped and the morning sickness began. Quinn's reaction was pure joy mixed with terror. A baby. Here in the Alaskan wilderness, miles from the nearest doctor, but Beatrice was calm, practical as always. "Women have been having babies in difficult circumstances since the beginning of time," she told him. "We will figure it out." She consulted with the wives of miners who stopped at New Hope, gathered advice, and made careful lists of supplies she would need. Erickson's wife, when they made their monthly trip to Juneau in February, gave Beatrice a book on childbirth and infant care and promised to come stay at New Hope when the time came. Spring arrived slowly, the ice on the channel breaking up in dramatic cracks and booms. As the weather warmed, traffic past New Hope increased. The mining camp to the north had struck a rich vein, and suddenly everyone wanted to head that direction. Quinn and Beatrice found themselves hosting a dozen travelers some nights, sleeping in shifts to handle the demand. Quinn expanded the guest cabin and built a larger storage structure. Beatrice, despite her growing belly, worked alongside him when she could, and managed the cooking and serving when she could not do heavy labor. The profits were adding up. They had paid Erickson back half of what they owed and were accumulating savings. In late June, Beatrice went into labor. It was the most terrifying day of Quinn's life. Mrs. Erickson had arrived 2 days earlier, thank God, and she took charge immediately. Quinn was banished from the cabin, left to pace and worry and pray. 15 hours later, his son was born. Quinn was allowed inside to find Beatrice exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny, red-faced infant. "Meet Thomas," she said softly. "Thomas Nolan." Quinn reached out with trembling hands, touching his son's impossibly small fingers. "He is perfect. You are perfect." Tears ran down his face unashamed. Thank you for him, for this, for everything." "We made him together," Beatrice reminded him. "Another partnership." Thomas proved to be a good baby, healthy and strong. Beatrice recovered quickly, and within weeks was back to running the way station with her usual efficiency, the baby strapped to her back or sleeping in a cradle Quinn had built near the stove. That summer and fall were the busiest yet. New Hope had become essential infrastructure for the northern mining operations. Quinn hired 2 young men to help with the work, paying them fair wages from the profits. Beatrice trained a local woman to help with the cooking. What had started as a desperate gamble was becoming a genuine success. By the winter of 1884, they had paid off all their debts to Erickson and had money in the bank in Juneau. The cabin had been expanded twice and was now a comfortable home. The guest facilities could handle 20 people. They had built a proper dock for boats, a large storage building, and even a small barn for the 2 mules they had purchased. Quinn stood on their dock one cold December morning, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold. Thomas was 14 months old, walking and starting to talk. Beatrice was pregnant again, due in the spring. New Hope was not just surviving but thriving. He thought about Cornelius Whitmore, probably still sitting in his mansion in Wasco, still scheming to control his little corner of California. Did he ever think about the cowboy he had humiliated in the $silver saloon? Did he know what his cruel joke had become? Quinn hoped not. He hoped Whitmore never learned that his victim had turned that worthless frozen land into something valuable, that the couple he had driven away had built a life more satisfying than he could imagine. Let the old man stew in his small-minded cruelty. Quinn had everything he needed right here. "Quinn," Beatrice called from the cabin, "breakfast is ready, and your son has decided to wear his porridge instead of eating it." Quinn laughed, heading back toward home. Toward the warm cabin, the crying baby, the wife he loved more with every passing day. Toward the life he had built from nothing, on land given as a joke. The years that followed fell into a rhythm of hard work and deep satisfaction. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret, was born in April of 1885. She was followed by another son, James, in 1887, and a second daughter, Catherine, in 1889. The cabin at New Hope expanded with each addition, growing from a single room into a proper house with separate bedrooms, a large kitchen, and even a front parlor. The business continued to flourish. The mining boom in northern Alaska brought a steady stream of travelers, and New Hope became famous for its hospitality and fair dealing. Beatrice's cooking was legendary, and Quinn's reputation for honest business practices meant people went out of their way to stop at their establishment. Quinn also developed a side business in timber, harvesting the forest sustainably and selling lumber to the growing communities around Juneau. He hired a crew, taught them his methods, and soon had a profitable operation that complemented the way station income. By 1890, the Nolan family was one of the most prosperous in the region. They had paid off every debt, owned their land free and clear, and had substantial savings. Quinn had even invested in several mining operations, becoming a minor partner in the ventures that supplied his way station. But the real wealth, as far as Quinn was concerned, had nothing to do with money. It was in the laughter of his children playing in the snow. It was in the quiet conversations with Beatrice in the evenings after the children were asleep. It was in the knowledge that he had built something lasting, something that would continue after he was gone. One evening in late 1890, a traveler arrived at New Hope with news from California. Cornelius Whitmore had died, they reported, of a heart attack in his mansion. His empire was being divided among his several children, who were apparently already fighting over the inheritance. Quinn felt nothing but a distant pity. Whitmore had spent his life accumulating wealth and power, and in the end, what did it matter? His children were squabbling over his corpse, and he would be forgotten in a generation. "Good riddance," Beatrice said that night, though without much heat. "Should we drink to his demise?" "No," Quinn said. "Let us drink to our life instead, to New Hope and to us." They clinked cups, sipping the whiskey Quinn kept for special occasions. "You ever think about what would have happened if he had not cheated you?" Beatrice asked. "If he had sold you land in California like you asked," Quinn considered. "I would have a small ranch in the San Joaquin Valley. I would be working myself to death trying to compete with men like Whitmore, and I would have never met you. So you are grateful to him. In a strange way, yes. He meant to break me, and instead he freed me." Quinn set down his cup, taking Beatrice's hand. "The best thing that ever happened to me was that night in the $silver saloon, as awful as it felt at the time. Because everything good in my life came from that moment." "Everything good in my life, too," Beatrice agreed. "I was so frightened then. I thought I had no options, no future. And now look at us." "Look at us," Quinn echoed, glancing around their comfortable home. Through the door, he could see their 4 children sleeping peacefully in their beds. Outside, 500 acres of Alaskan land stretched in all directions, land they had made productive and valuable through sheer determination. "We should write our story down," Beatrice said suddenly. "For the children, so they know how we got here. So they understand that good things can come from bad circumstances if you are willing to work hard and take risks." "You should write it," Quinn said. "You are better with words than I am." "We will write it together," Beatrice decided, "like we do everything else." And so, over the following winter, they did just that. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep and the way station was closed for the night, Quinn and Beatrice would sit at their table and write down their story. How a wealthy man gave a cowboy frozen land as a joke. How that joke became a partnership, then a marriage, then a legacy. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a strong young man, learning the timber business from his father and showing a sharp head for numbers. Margaret inherited her mother's talent for cooking and managing people, taking over more of the way station operations as she entered her teenage years. James was quiet and thoughtful, fascinated by books and learning, and eventually went to school in Seattle. Catherine, the youngest, was fearless and adventurous, always exploring the forest around New Hope and bringing home everything from injured birds to bear cubs. In 1897, news reached New Hope that would change Alaska forever. Gold had been discovered in the Klondike, across the border in Canada, and suddenly the trickle of miners heading north became a flood. Tens of thousands of people poured into Alaska, all desperate to reach the goldfields. New Hope was perfectly positioned to capitalize on the rush. Quinn and his family expanded their operations, building more guest cabins, increasing storage, hiring dozens of workers. For 2 years, they barely had time to breathe. The profits were staggering, but more importantly, the Nolans helped hundreds of desperate people survive their journey north, offering fair prices, honest advice, and genuine compassion. When the rush finally subsided in 1899, the Nolan family found themselves genuinely wealthy. But they had not changed. They still lived in the same expanded cabin at New Hope. They still worked alongside their employees. They still welcomed every traveler with the same hospitality they had offered when it was just Quinn and Beatrice in 1883. By 1900, Quinn was 44 years old and Beatrice was 42. Their children were young adults, each finding their own paths in life. Thomas had married and built his own house on New Hope land, taking over the timber operations. Margaret ran the way station with her mother and had attracted the attention of several suitors, though she had not yet decided on any of them. James was at university in Seattle, studying law. Catherine, at 16, was still deciding what she wanted to do, though Quinn suspected she would end up somewhere even more wild than Alaska. One warm June evening, Quinn and Beatrice took a walk along the Channel shore, something they tried to do regularly to escape the bustle of their busy household. "You remember our first night here?" Quinn asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Camping on this beach, looking at that broken-down cabin. I remember thinking we were insane," Beatrice said with a laugh. 500 acres of wilderness and not a clue what to do with it. We figured it out. We did." She leaned against him. "We built something remarkable, Quinn. Not just the business, but our family, our life. We turned a joke into a legacy." "Speaking of legacy," Quinn said carefully, "I have been thinking. Thomas can run the timber operation and Margaret can handle the way station. James does not want any part of this life, and that is fine. But what about Catherine? And what about the land itself? What are you proposing?" "I think we should deed portions of New Hope to each of the children. Thomas gets the timberland, Margaret gets the way station and main house, James gets cash to support his career." and Catherine gets the northern section, the wild part we have never developed." Quinn paused. "But I also think we should set aside a piece to remain forever wild, protected. A place our grandchildren and great-grandchildren can come and see Alaska the way we first saw it." Beatrice was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I like that, a lot. It honors what this place gave us while also planning for the future." She smiled up at him. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher." Quinn kissed her forehead. "Everything I know about building a life I learned from you. Flatterer. But I will accept the compliment." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "Let us do it. Let us divide the land and secure the future. We have worked too hard to not plan properly for what comes next." They drew up the documents that summer, working with a lawyer in Juneau to ensure everything was legal and proper. The division of New Hope was formalized, each child receiving their inheritance while Quinn and Beatrice retained life tenancy. The northern 200 acres were placed in a family trust, to be kept wild in perpetuity. In August of 1900, they gathered the whole family at New Hope for a celebration. All 4 children were present, along with Thomas's wife and their first grandchild, a baby girl named Elizabeth. Quinn stood in front of the main house, the house he and Beatrice had built from that first broken cabin, and looked at his assembled family. "Your mother and I have an announcement," he began. "We are giving you New Hope, divided among you according to your interests and abilities. This land was given to me as a joke by a cruel man who wanted to destroy me, but it became our salvation. It gave us a home, a living, and a purpose. Now it is yours to steward for the next generation." He went on to explain the divisions, presenting each child with their deeds. There were tears and laughter, hugs and promises to honor the legacy they had been given. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Quinn and Beatrice sat on their porch, watching the northern lights dance across the sky. The auroras had always been Quinn's favorite part of Alaska, the way the sky came alive with color and motion. "We did it," Beatrice said softly. "We really did it. We did." Quinn pulled her closer. "From that moment in Wasco when you found me at my lowest point, to right now with our grandchild sleeping inside, we turned a joke into a miracle. Not a miracle. Hard work and partnership and love. Maybe all 3, Quinn suggested. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had weathered every storm together and come out stronger for it. The land around them was theirs, but more importantly, they were each other's. That had always been the real treasure. In the years that followed, Quinn and Beatrice gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of New Hope, letting their children take over. They remained active and involved, but the burden of management shifted to the younger generation. It gave them time to simply enjoy each other's company, to travel occasionally, to spoil their growing collection of grandchildren. Margaret married in 1902, a decent young man who worked as a surveyor and who treated her with the respect and partnership she demanded. James finished law school and opened a practice in Juneau, becoming a respected advocate for fair treatment of minors and small business owners. Catherine, true to her adventurous nature, became a hunting guide, leading expeditions into the Alaskan interior and earning a reputation as one of the best trackers in the territory. Thomas and his wife had 4 more children, and Margaret had 3. James had 2, and even Catherine eventually married and had 1 daughter. New Hope became a sprawling family compound, with multiple houses dotting the original 500 acres. Quinn was 60 when Alaska officially became a territory of the United States in 1912. He stood on the dock at New Hope, watching boats pass by flying American flags, and reflected on all the changes he had witnessed. The wild frontier he had arrived at in 1883 was slowly becoming civilized, though it retained enough of its wild character to satisfy even his adventurous soul. Beatrice, at 58, was as sharp and capable as ever, though her hair had gone completely silver. She remained the matriarch of the Nolan clan, the one everyone came to with problems or questions, the keeper of family history and wisdom. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. There were nearly 40 people present, spanning 3 generations, all of them owing their existence to the choice 2 desperate people had made 3 decades earlier. Quinn stood to make a toast, feeling his age but still strong. 30 years ago, your mother and I stood in a little church in Juneau and made promises to each other. We had nothing but hope and determination. We had every reason to fail and almost no reason to succeed. But we had each other, and that made all the difference. He paused, looking at Beatrice with all the love in his heart. People ask me sometimes if I ever regret how my life turned out, if I wish I had bought land in California instead of ending up here, and my answer is always the same. This life, with this woman in this place, is better than anything I could have imagined. What seemed like the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best, and I would not change a single moment of the journey. The gathered family erupted in cheers and applause. Beatrice stood and kissed him, and for a moment they were not grandparents and business owners and pillars of the community. They were just Quinn and Beatrice, the cowboy and the shop girl who had taken a leap of faith into the unknown. Quinn lived to be 73 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1929. His last conscious moments were spent looking at Beatrice, still beautiful to him after 46 years of marriage, and feeling grateful for every single day they had shared. Beatrice lived another 8 years, dying at 82 in 1937. She remained sharp and active until the very end, still involved in the family business, still telling stories about the early days, still keeping alive the memory of how New Hope came to be. They were buried together on a hill overlooking the channel, on land they had made into a home through sheer determination and love. The headstone was simple: Quinn Nolan, 1856–1929, Beatrice Bridges Nolan, 1855–1937, partners, spouses, builders of New Hope. Their descendants continued to operate New Hope for generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. The way station eventually became a historic site, the timber operations grew into a sustainable forestry company, and the protected wilderness area became a beloved family retreat. But the real legacy was not the buildings or the business, or even the land. It was the story itself, the tale of how a wealthy man's cruel joke became a salvation, how frozen land nobody wanted became the foundation of a family dynasty, and how 2 desperate people found in each other something more valuable than any gold strike. The story was written down, just as Quinn and Beatrice had planned, and passed down through the generations. Every Nolan child grew up hearing about the night in the Silver Dollar Saloon, the journey north on the Pacific Star, the first sight of the broken cabin that would become their family home. They learned that good could come from bad circumstances, that partnership and love could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best. In later years, when historians wrote about the settlement of Alaska and the development of its economy, New Hope was always mentioned as an example of frontier entrepreneurship and family success. But the real story was never about business success or economic development. It was about 2 people who refused to let cruelty and hardship defeat them, who found in each other the strength to build something remarkable, and who proved that home is not where you start, but where you choose to make your stand. The frozen land that was meant as a joke became fertile ground for love, family, and legacy. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge Quinn Nolan could have ever taken on Cornelius Whitmore. Not anger or bitterness, but a life so full of joy and accomplishment that the wealthy man's attempt at destruction became nothing more than a footnote in a much larger story of triumph. New Hope stood for over a century as a testament to what two people could build when they refused to give up, when they chose partnership over pride, and when they understood that the value of land is not in its immediate prospects, but in what you are willing to make of it. The cabin that started as shelter for two desperate people became a home for generations, and the 500 acres given as a cruel joke became the foundation of a family that would shape Alaska's history for over 100 years. And somewhere, perhaps, Cornelius Whitmore's ghost understood that his greatest failure was not recognizing the potential he had accidentally given away. He had wanted to break a cowboy's spirit, and instead, he had freed that man to become something far greater than Whitmore himself had ever been. Not wealthier, perhaps, but richer in all the ways that truly mattered. That was the story of New Hope, and it was a story that would be told for generations to come, inspiring others to see opportunity in disaster, to find strength in partnership, and to understand that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the cruelest packages. Quinn and Beatrice Nolan had proven that frozen land could bloom, that jokes could become joy, and that love and hard work could transform even the bleakest beginning into the most beautiful ending.